Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because it will be that time in at least one of. I'm delighted to say that we are joined today by participants from literally all over the world. I was having a look at the register earlier this morning, and I know that we've got participants coming in from Spain, from Brazil, from Switzerland, Kenya, the USA, Canada, the UK, the Ukraine, South Africa, and Japan, amongst others. So I know that there's a lot of people very interested in this topic. It's clearly really important for us as publishers and media owners right now to understand what is happening with our content, who is scraping, who is viewing, who is using and redistributing our content, either with our permission or more critically, without our permission. And if they are so doing, then what can we do about it? How can we address that? And ultimately, and most importantly, from most of our perspective, how can we set ourselves up to protect that copyright and that IP in the future? And is there an opportunity to monetize that? And all of these issues we're going to be talking about today. So I was lucky enough to meet with Josh when he was in London a month or two ago, and was really fascinated to learn about TollBit and about the work that the business are doing, the technology that they have developed that enables publishers to understand more about this space. And we've been talking and looking at ways that we can bring that understanding to our FIPP audience, to you as FIPP members. And I'm really delighted to be welcoming Josh and Cody from TollBit this afternoon to talk to us about their latest report, to give you an exclusive first view on that. But also really delighted that alongside Josh and Cody, we have Elsa Espalve, who is the head of new business development at RBA, the biggest publisher in Spain, and also the biggest Spanish language publisher outside of Spain, which is really important and really critical actually in this particular conversation. And also Alex Poderoso, who is the digital director at RBA. And Elsa and Alex have been engaging with Josh and Cody and their team at TollBit, and they will be able to talk to you a little bit more about how they have integrated, what they have learned from running the TollBit software on their content, and most critically and hopefully most usefully for everybody here, what they have done as a result of that and what they're starting to be able to see could happen going forward. So I'm not going to say any more because really this is all over to Josh and to Cody and the team at TollBit. And I'm going to be just as interested an observer as the rest of you. So over to you guys.
Fantastic. Thank you. Cody, do you want to pull up our slides?
Yeah, awesome. Great to see everybody today. Give me one moment here. I'm just gonna share my screen. Get this up and running. Okay. And I'm gonna jump into presentation mode.
Let's jump back to the start if you don't mind.
There we go. Cool.
All right. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks to everyone who's on. Really appreciate the time and excited to share more about TollBit. The company was founded on the essential realization that as AI applications and services proliferate, the fundamental economics that have powered the open web for years are at risk. This is something I think we're all somewhat aware of now. Maybe it wasn't so obvious a couple of years ago, but these fundamental economics are essentially person goes to website and either sees an advertisement, buys something, or subscribes. And if person no longer goes to website and bot goes to website on person's behalf, those economics begin to change or are at risk. And what we need is a fundamental new piece of infrastructure, a new protocol, so that we can power a fair value exchange in this bot first world, bot to website, machine to machine, et cetera. And so that was really the sort of founding vision and problem that TollBit set out to solve. What that means today is we say we help publishers monitor, manage, and monetize AI bot scraping. This correlates to three core products that we offer to our website customers. The first is our analytics tools. So this gives publishers in-depth insights into what is actually happening in terms of scraping. I think a lot of folks are aware at a high level that they're being scraped, but don't necessarily see or are often surprised by the volume and the frequency and just how pervasive this behavior is. So we give partners visibility into who's scraping your content, which bots are coming, what content is being scraped the most. You can see that on a page-by-page level. Are they listening to your robots.txt file? The short answer is, in most cases, no. Are you getting referral traffic back from real people in exchange for that scraping activity? So all sorts of analytics to allow you to get more data, more insights, so that you can make better decisions about how you want to inform or implement your AI distribution strategy going forward. The second piece of our product is what we call our bot paywall. Now, this allows publishers to take some of that bot traffic that they select. So publishers are in control and can select on a bot by bot basis. It's not an all or nothing solution, but select which bots you want to block and redirect them to this paywall. The paywall does a few things. First, it prevents access to your content, most importantly, but it also sends back a clear error message that says, in effect, you're not authorized to access this content without paying for it. That's important for a handful of reasons. Making it very clear that access to the content without your permission is unauthorized is important, and then presenting the path to potential payment is also, we think, very important. Blocking is only half the battle. We need to block and be defensive, but we also have to present a viable alternative in the form of authorized or monetized access, which gets to the third product that we offer to publishers, which is our monetization tools. Now, the monetization side of our ecosystem is early, but growing quickly. And this allows publishers to establish terms under which their content can be accessed, and then establish rates for that access. The rates are usage-based, so cost per display, think like a CPM or RPM type of rate. And this allows developers to come in, review your terms, review your pricing, and then once they agree to those, then when those bots hit your paywall, we can verify that they're a paying customer, we can pass through the content that they're requesting, and we can monitor that activity and bill them accordingly. Publishers are in total control in this instance. They can set their own terms, and you can set your own pricing. You can carve up your pricing in a number of different ways to try and maximize value. So by vertical, by time, by individual article, or by individual bot or end customer. So trying to give publishers as much flexibility and control in how they want to monetize AI scraping through our monetization tools. And then the fourth piece I'll just touch on briefly is we can leverage our infrastructure to power direct one-on-one deals. So we have a number of publishers who have done a direct deal with one of the large AI companies. Those economics sit outside of our platform, but they run the content access via TollBit and via our APIs and infrastructure, which gives them, again, better control. They can filter out content like syndicated content, as well as better analytics and insights into the usage on the other side of that deal. So a pretty flexible sort of framework, and we've tried to design TollBit really to be to fit whatever your AI strategy may be, right? If you want to just get a better picture of what's happening, you can just use the analytics product. If you want to start to block and get more control, you can do that with the paywall. And if you want to start to lean into monetization, obviously you can do that as well. In terms of progress, we are growing quite quickly despite being a young company. We have now signed up over 2,000 publisher sites onto TollBit, analyzed 65 billion website visits, so seeing a very wide amount of traffic, almost 500 million AI bot scrapes that we've detected. And in the marketplace, we've driven about 15 million transactions. So still small and early on the marketplace side, but growing very quickly. That's up from 5 million in Q4. So, but what's really exciting about this is now that we have grown to this scale, we are seeing a lot of volume, we're seeing a lot of traffic, and it's allowing us to get pretty interesting insights into what's happening in the ecosystem, which is informing our what we call our State of the Bots report. We just published last month our second quarterly State of the Bots report, covering data from Q1 2025, and we're excited to share some of that with you today.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. And yeah, before we jump into conversation with Elsa and Alex, we'll share some highlights from the State of the Bots report. And we'll certainly leave some time for Q&A at the end to chat through this in more detail with folks. But at a high level, some of the most interesting takeaways that we saw within the data from Q1, first was a surge in AI scraping activity. AI bot traffic nearly doubled in Q1 of this year, and we most notably saw a significant shift towards real-time retrieval bots, or RAG. RAG bots are now scraping more than training crawlers, and the RAG scrapes that we've seen per site grew 49% quarter over quarter, which was about 2.5 the growth rate of training bots. So I think the important takeaway here is that the market has evolved where training is not the primary use case for many of these AI developers. Retrieval is really the name of the game, and as we're seeing exponential growth here, that's only likely to increase moving forward as well. And in terms of overall AI volume, that rose 87% in Q1 for sites that we were tracking in TollBit. And another piece of data that was quite interesting and kind of comes in tandem with the explosion of scraping that we're seeing as a use case for RAG and retrieval is bots bypassing protections. Many publishers to date have been relying on their robots.txt to try and prevent these developers from scraping and accessing their content. But that's really not working anymore, as many of these AI crawlers are ignoring these rules and bypassing and continuing to access and scrape content. The share of AI bot scrapes that bypass robots.txt, we saw jump from 3.3% in Q4 of 2024 to just about 13% by the end of Q1 2025. And notably, we saw over 26 million disallowed scrapes in March alone. So 26 million scrapes of sites that had robots.txt in place, asking these developers not to scrape their content. And they went ahead and scraped that anyway. And with the rise of retrieval, we are seeing this happen more frequently, especially for some of the search and user-based agents that some of these AI developers are using. They have even updated for some of them within their terms that when they are going out and retrieving content on behalf of a user, whenever they are doing a query, they are not going to listen to robots.txt. They are going to bypass that. And publishers tried to disallow 4x more bots over the past year. But AI agents are just increasingly crawling regardless and accessing that content. So it has been quite interesting to see the evolution on that front.
Yeah, and then the other thing that we have seen, and we published this in our first bots report as well, but the referral traffic back from or in exchange for this scraping activity remains incredibly low. We are seeing publishers getting scraped in the millions of times a month and getting real people audience back in the hundreds or just single thousands in exchange for that scraping activity. So what we've seen through our network is Google, for example, sends about almost 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. Bing's chatbot returns 1 visitor for every 11 scrapes. But the AI-driven apps like OpenAI, Perplexity, it's 1 visitor for every 180 scrapes, 1 visitor for every 370 scrapes, and Anthropic with a lovely 1 visitor for every 8,500 scrapes. So we're really not seeing the referral traffic value driver come back to publishers in exchange for this scraping activity, which is something, I think in the early days of this, the AI companies were talking about a lot. I think trying to push the narrative, oh, we're going to be like Google, we will send you traffic back. I think there's broad acknowledgement from their side, as well as in the data that we're seeing, that that's just not the case. These answer engines are designed to answer the question and give the information natively within that experience, and the traffic back is about 96% lower than what you would expect if that person asked the same question in a traditional Google search. So not a lever of value that we're seeing coming back to publishers in exchange for allowing scraping activity on their site. And then, given these trends, one of the exciting things or one of the things that we are trying to push, and we're happy to see, is that more publishers are beginning to take action. So, if you look at the first 3 data points that we highlighted, right, which is that obviously scraping activity is growing dramatically, and it is specifically focused around retrieval. Robots.txt is not sufficient. And AI companies are continuing to scrape, even if you have robots.txt instructions telling them not to. And third, there really is today, at least, no value exchange against that scraping. They're not sending back referral traffic. They're not delivering value back to the publishers in exchange for that access. And what we're seeing is more publishers, I think, are recognizing this and beginning to take more aggressive action. And for us, that means setting up the bot paywall. So we saw adoption of TollBit's bot paywall grow pretty dramatically. It grew about 730% from Q4 to Q1, and we sent almost 100 million bots to our paywall, up from about 11 million bots to the paywall in Q4. So, it's early progress, but we think that getting better control over this activity is the best way to move forward, and hopefully push towards an ecosystem where, again, there is a fair exchange of value for access to your content and creative works, and just proactive management of this situation. So those are the 4 kind of highlights out of this report. We will continue to produce these reports quarterly, and as our network grows, hopefully continue to find interesting nuggets of information like this. But just to recap, scraping growing dramatically, and RAG is now much bigger than training. Robots.txt really is not sufficient. They continue to ignore it in very high volumes. Referral traffic really is not coming back in exchange for this activity. And fourth, we're seeing more publishers take proactive control and begin to block and send these bots to a paywall. So thanks. And we'll move on to the next.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, now we'd love to shift to some conversation with Elsa and Alex to get a better understanding of how they've been working with us and what their journey has looked like to date. So to kick things off on that front, I think it would be helpful, Elsa and Alex, if you could just kind of introduce your organization, some of the type of content and the scale at which you guys are operating.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Elsa Esparvé. I'm the head of new business, and Alex Poderoso, my colleague, is the digital director. As Alastair said, we work at RBA. RBA is the biggest magazine publisher in Spanish worldwide. We publish 24 magazines, a wide range of content from history, all National Geographic magazines, decoration, cooking, architecture. It was founded 30 years ago, and we have a lot of content. We publish, besides the Spanish, we publish also magazines in Portuguese and Italian. No? So, well, I guess that all this story with you started when, in my case, and I'm sure that many people will understand me, my boss said, bring the money and bring it now. No? So, and you say, okay. So the first thing I did personally was to admit that I was absolutely lost in this new world. The second thing was to also to accept that I was feeling too old for all this that's happening and really fast, no? And suddenly I started to do some phone calls. Okay, I said, okay, so let's no understand. Let's see what the other publishers are doing, no? So talking with Alastair from FIPP, because I used to call him when I have a problem. It's like my 911. And Al told me about a few collaborators or funds, and he told me about TollBit. No, I thought it was very logic to start collaborating with someone who could give us data, because we know no that the bots were accessing no and scrapping our websites, but we didn't know who. So we were entering in our house, but we didn't know how many times and who was coming. No, so RBA is a. I mean, we are over 400 people here, but we work very close with the digital team. And I asked Alex, no, let's have a meeting with TollBit. Let's listen to them, and maybe it's a good start. And that's why we are here. So if it's okay for you, I think that Alex could introduce you how was how did we implement your algorithm in our websites and what we learned from that. So please,
Yeah,
Alex.
I think that would be great. And Alex, before so it'd be super helpful to get a better sense of, obviously you guys recognized that there was a problem with AI scraping, that there was a lot of activity. But if prior to having initial conversations with us, if you guys were doing anything to manage AI bots, or how you were kind of thinking about the overall problem of
No, in fact, no. At that time, we were working on the training models, on data for training models. So one of the discoverings of this relationship with TollBit was this RAG thing, this real-time market that is growing up, because somehow they already have all the information they want for the model. So we needed to somehow shift the knowledge or the actions that we were taking on AI. This I think it was the first learning on this relationship. So as Elsa said, it was important for us to have a tool that gave us data analytics, not just who is coming and how many times, but which content was more interesting for them,
Yeah. Yeah. And after we initially had conversations, would love to get a sense of, what ultimately led to the decision to implement TollBit, to set up the analytics, and maybe helpful for some of the other folks on the conversation. What type of conversations did you guys have internally, and kind of who are the stakeholders that were involved that made the decision that TollBit would be helpful to get a better read and pulse on what's happening?
Well, we already had some robots takes T, lines, but we didn't have the full picture on how many different AI, drivers were in the market. We only had in the radar Perplexity, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, but there was many others, many even we didn't know about that. So the first conversations with our bosses was maybe archive content for training modeling is not, what this kind of technology companies are looking for. I think it was the first thing. And the second thing was, like, we don't know exactly what they are you know, what they are coming from, what they are looking for. Because the first idea that we had was maybe they are interested in some brands that we have. We thought maybe they are very interested in National Geographic, for instance, because, you know, it's a very, very respectable brand with, you know, a thorough journalism and facts that everybody acknowledge, you know. Maybe they are looking for this. So, but this idea was needed to be, you know, confirmed with data. This is how we get to TollBit and decide to implement TollBit, and the kind of not just, you know, discussions with our bosses, but also the kind of analysis that we are doing with TollBit data.
Mm-hmm.
If
Awesome.
you allow me to add something, I
Please.
think that the problem that we are still facing, at least from my side, because I'm in charge of acquiring and selling content, is that we don't know which will be the final product. No, I mean, which will be the future business, near, close, no, like Spotify, like iTunes. I don't know personally how to license all this content if the final product is not there. And all of us, we are quite lost, no? And that's why, Alex, no, the first thing is to understand, at least right now, what's going on.
Yep. 100% makes sense. And Alex, in terms of the actual implementation process itself, would love to hear about, you know, the process, what that looked like on your end, how your team got up and running, and also you know, which sites that you guys decided to start with, and the thinking behind that. You guys obviously have a large portfolio of different brands, so how you kind of landed on some initial sites to get started with.
Initial sites, easy, all of them. So we have 17 sites, so we decided to, you know, to configure and set up TollBit for all of them, because for us, all of them were important, and we were expecting to get data and analytics from all of them. This was the main need that we have. And it was easy to implement because there's an easy UI. I mean, we were talking with our IT team, so had to somehow tweak the CN and so on. And it was a matter of weeks, a few days, maybe. And we started with National Geographic just because we initially thought that National Geographic was, you know, the brand that was more exposed to these bots.
Awesome. Yeah, and glad to hear that the implementation process was pretty straightforward and relatively easy for you guys. That's certainly one thing that we have tried to make it easy and convenient for folks to get up and running on TollBit, and to try and reduce the amount of friction required to get started and to start actually seeing data and analytics. After getting set up, would love to hear about the initial data that you started to see. Would love to hear about some of the initial findings and maybe some of the key takeaways that you guys saw.
First of all, like I said, discovering that there are different kinds of bots. You know, we were thinking on OpenAI bot. No, but OpenAI has 3 different bots. You know, you have the bot that models, it takes information for model modeling, you know, or model training. And then we have the user, and then we have the search bot. So this was the main finding. We not only have many different, you know, third parties that are coming to our website, but they have different bots. And these different bots give us some kind of information on what's the kind of use of our content that these platforms are doing with our content, no? So here we really get that this kind of interest for the real-time content was very high, and it was going up. You know, this was the first finding. I think that second finding is that we discovered that they are not just interested on brands, but somehow they are coming to the website more or less proportional to the traffic that a website has. You know, maybe we have brands that are not so well known, but they have lots of traffic. So there are lots of users looking for information related to that website. So they are coming a lot too. So there's not clear relationship between brands, and the number of scrapes for the websites. Then we discover, as you mentioned in your report, that they are scraping lots of content, but giving just a few users. For instance, for every 200,000 requests from OpenAI, from the bot, we only get 200 users. One user per mil, or per thousand, sorry, scrapes, okay? And this was a finding very, very interesting. And the other one that is surprising too is that we can't get information from Google or Microsoft, okay? So we are somehow saying that there are lots of bad guys there, stealing your content, but maybe we have two of them that are very, very important, even for the ecosystem of digital, for the publishers that are Google and Microsoft. And they are getting the information too, but they don't allows us to get the information because they somehow don't distinguish, the bots when they are coming for the search for Google Discover or just for any AI use of the content.
Sorry, okay. Alex, for people like me that we are very lost when you the digital people explain that. When you were telling me this, what you meant is that when you see the data, you cannot distinguish, if it's someone looking in the website, in Google, or it's the bot, you cannot distinguish that.
Exactly. Well, the TollBit team explained us that even maybe Microsoft, they register the access like Bing search. So we don't know exactly if it's someone or a bot that is having information for indexing your content linked in Bing. That is something that for us is a source of traffic, But if they are coming to get content for AI, it's a different thing, but we don't know that.
Yeah, and just to I guess sort of double down on that, the reason for that, a lot of the AI companies are using specific bots for specific purposes. The analytics that you get within TollBit are on a sort of per bot basis. So you're able to track these individual bots and those individual bots' activity. Because Google uses the same bot for everything, it's much harder to differentiate what they may be doing with that information. Unlike, for example, OpenAI, which breaks out all three bots for all three different use cases.
Yeah. And now that you guys have been tracking and monitoring this data for I think a couple of months at this point, curious, how your team has thought about kind of the next step in the equation, moving from monitoring to actively blocking bots. And as you guys think through that decision, what have been some of the driving forces there?
Well, we were pretty sure that we should block them. This was the next step that we are working, in fact, on this. I think that the first thing that we need to do with this data is understanding which content is interesting for those platforms. This data that is in page level is so important for us, because at the end, we understand this is important because it's real time. It's important because it's this topic, or is this author, or is this, understanding how all your content works in terms of AI, demand is something very important for us, because the third step after blocking them is to set up a pricing, or offer them our content, but with a price, with something that is legal. So it's important for us not just to know which platforms are more interested in the content, but also which content they are looking for, you know?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And I think, ultimately from our perspective, the biggest opportunity that we see here is around monetization and the ability to set usage-based rates for access to content, to develop this new economic model that creates a fair exchange of value for content from publishers and access via an authorized path for developers. So would love to also hear, how you're thinking about the broader approach to monetization and your thoughts on setting the precedent that your content's not available for free to these AI companies. And Elsa, to your point, it's certainly early on how this market is developing. What the end product looks like is still a bit in flux, but it's starting to come into shape to some extent. So curious how you guys are thinking about this, and what the path forward looks like.
Well, the first advice that we would give to our colleagues, and again, accepting that many changes there will be many changes, and that we must learn a lot still. Okay, but if we can share what we've learned from until now, first of all, is to give value to our IP, to our content, because our websites were open, and we were together comparing this with what happened with the music business a few years ago, when many MP3 were, you could find music everywhere online, but as they were selling CDs, it was okay. But now we are having less traffic in our websites, and now we are realizing that all our content is there and is for free. So first thing, to measure that, and you were crucial in this step. It was great to work with you. Well, of course, together with digital department, it's the only way to do that is to have two different views and approaches. The second thing, as soon as you have that, you must protect the access to your websites, and there are many tools, and yours is an example. There are firewalls, whatever. Also to learn, and Alex said that correctly, that why they are accessing to our websites, which is the content that they want from us, and I think that why we are good for them. And the third part is to give a price to that content and start negotiating. And of course, that we will start closing deals, and with all these companies, and hopefully we will be changing this licensing model as soon as we can see the final business, because it's not ready yet. I don't know if I answered your question. Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. And I think, that's certainly what we're working towards is developing what that market and kind of an efficient exchange of value could look like, through the usage-based rates that publishers are able to set on TollBit, and give developers the opportunity to access that content in an authorized capacity. As we've had conversations with many developers as well, they are not inherently opposed to paying for content, but today the route to doing that has been quite challenging. As most folks are aware, there's been a handful of these large licensing deals with the likes of OpenAI and some of the other large model developers, but they're complicated to put in place, right? They require partnerships teams, lawyers, oftentimes in MG. It's not really a scalable process. And as we kind of shift to these more retrieval-based models as well, it's often not apparent what content is going to be needed and how frequently content will be needed as well. So we think that the more usage-based approach is one that makes sense for both developers. It gives them the opportunity to access this content, and for publishers to set a fair price for their content. as well. So appreciate you sharing more on how you guys are thinking about that. And overall, I think some of the key takeaways that you shared and highlighted, and Alex, some of the patterns that you noted were quite interesting. And I think those are certainly commonalities that we're seeing across many publishers and sites that are on TollBit today. Before we wrap up and move to Q&A, I'm curious if there's any other advice or thoughts that you want to share with other folks on how they should be considering next steps for their content, whether maybe they should be checking out TollBit as well, or kind of other resources that they should be leaning into.
I think that we all together must protect the IP, and we must start closing the doors that were open until now, and we didn't care because the business was running. So it's our responsibility now to close all this. It will give value to our content, to what we do. And the second thing is not to sign an agreement immediately, because I felt sometimes that it was a kind of these companies were buying an insurance, but I felt that they wanted to pay us for $100 the insurance for the whole White House, So no, it's not like that. But I cannot license all the content just to protect you against an author who's coming or no. So let's think about it, and let's ask, and let's accept that we are, as I've said, sometimes we felt like the Hobbit in the search of the ring, and we haven't found it yet, but we will, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you both. Alistair, I think we'd love to answer any questions or kick off conversation with the broader group.
Absolutely. I think there's, well, I can see we've got questions coming through already. I've got a few up my sleeve, but I want to make sure that we answer those questions that people have asked in the chat here. And please do feel free to keep adding these. We've got a question, actually, Gabriele asked this earlier when you were talking through the slides, Josh and Cody, specifically the slide where you were looking at the minimal referral traffic coming via the bots, and you referenced 179 to 1 for OpenAI, etc. Gabriele's question there is, were you referring to RAG-based scraping only, or is that the total scraping in that sum?
Yeah, so that is specifically RAG-based scraping, and then also eliminates sort of superfluous scraping. For example, scrapes of robots.txt itself, things like that are removed. So it's only RAG-based scraping to actual content.
Where you can tell, I guess, as you said, I think Google, for example, don't split that out, right? So you.
Correct. So yeah, so someone like Google, we see a very different ratio, in part because traditional Google search sends a lot of referral traffic, obviously, but also because they don't break out the difference.
Good. Okay. Hopefully that answers that question. I think the point remains. The fact is, these platforms are not providing referrals back to, and that's been backed up, as Alex and Elsa have gone on to say in what they've seen at RBA. And then we've got a question, which I think this question, and thank you, Phil, for asking this. This is very much, on one of the points that I wanted to raise is that, it is early days in terms of monetization is concerned, and we all get that. But Phil's asking, is there any sense yet of whether this is mainly a play for large volume publishers who have significant traffic and users, or do we see opportunities for smaller and niche publishers to achieve an ROI by using a tool like TollBit or by using TollBit?
Yeah, we absolutely see an opportunity for the longer tail, and specifically for specific niches or local. We think is a really interesting opportunity. One of the dynamics that we find interesting in this potential future is the value ascribed to the content is actually going to be much more aligned in theory with the quality and differentiation of the content itself, right? And if you think about what has driven value in the last 10 years, it's really an ability to arbitrage Google or social to drive traffic and then serve ads next to the content. You know, and the content obviously has something to do with that, but it's not the primary driver necessarily, right? If you're really good at arbitraging SEO or social, you can get traffic almost regardless of what the article itself says. If you think about how these AI companies are pulling in and valuing content, they have specific information that they need, specific answers that they need to holes that they need to fill, essentially. And so they'll go out looking for that information, and we don't know exactly how they will evaluate or assess quality. But you can imagine a world where highly differentiated, specific content in a niche can actually drive a really effective premium precisely because it's differentiated. You know, we had a conversation with one of the large AI companies, and they were saying essentially that, you know, a big publisher who has a list of the top 10 coffee makers is interesting to us, but that actually may not be as interesting as, you know, some guy who has a small blog about coffee makers that he's been writing for 15 years. And while that may not be a massive traffic site, you know, he may be the authority on coffee makers. And so that content is actually really interesting to them. So in short, yes, we think there's actually a lot of potential value for specific niches, specific localities, and highly differentiated content.
And I guess, you know, the one of the advantages of using the tool is that as a publisher, you get to set the rate essentially for that based on your quality, rather than being a kind of market-driven, scale-based rate, which is how the advertising model that we're familiar with has kind of grown up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Publishers have total control over how they set their pricing, and importantly, publishers are not locked into whatever pricing they set, right? If you're going out and signing a multi-year agreement, you're sort of locked into whatever you've done there. The nice thing about TollBit is publishers can test, experiment, and change going forward, right? If they feel that, you know, maybe they set their pricing too low and they want to drive a premium, they can do that. If you set your pricing too high and you know no one's coming through, you can sort of drop it over time until you find that market rate.
Makes sense. Good. And we've got another question here from an anonymous attendee, but this person is asking about the Cloudflare product that launched today. So Cloudflare, for those that aren't aware, have just launched a pay-per-crawl tool today. And the simple question is, how does TollBit's offering compare? Over to you.
Yeah, I knew we were going to get this one. No, look, I think honestly for us, we were mostly excited to see this. You know, to see folks, I think, waking up to the necessity of blocking, and to Elsa's point, the necessity of locking down intellectual property and locking down content. And so having someone like Cloudflare also, you know, sort of beating that drum that it's important for us to block access and control access. You know, we're happy that they've joined the party in that respect. On the monetization front, you know, we're not totally sure exactly what's behind their announcement. We've tried to get some intelligence on exactly what's there. It sounds like it's been announced but not exactly launched or fleshed out, so we don't know specifically how to compare those two products. But as I said, I think we're happy to see folks jumping into the blocking the blocking party. And what I would say, you know, as far as TollBit versus Cloudflare, you know, Cloudflare at its core is a CDN and a cybersecurity company. What we believe is necessary in this ecosystem is a solution that is CDN or tech stack agnostic, right? And so TollBit can work with Cloudflare. We have plenty of TollBit customers who use Cloudflare as their CDN, but use TollBit as their monetization solution. But we also have publishers on Fastly, Akamai, Amazon CloudFront, WordPress VIP, et cetera. And so we think that this needs to be a very broad-based, industry-wide solution, and like I said, needs to be tech stack agnostic. So, if you want to run your CDN on Fastly and you want to do your bot blocking through Datadome and your monetization through TollBit, that's a setup you can do. If you want to do your CDN and your bot blocking through Fastly, but run the monetization through TollBit, you can do that, right? So preserving that flexibility in terms of tech stack so that you can optimize that part of your core business is really important.
Good stuff. And now I've got two questions, both from esteemed former colleagues of mine who I know well, and both referring to legislation and questions that I think are really important for us as an industry. So I'm going to start with Drew's question, which is on the chat there, which is, what is the incentive for the AI companies to work with smaller publishers, especially, without legislation in place to enforce it? Josh and Cody, what would you say to that? And also after that to Elsa.
Yeah, so I think this is a great question, and it's an important one. Legislation, we think, is critical, and we want to do what we can to help provide clear data in the conversation around legislation. A lot of the legislation focus to date has been around copyright law. We also think there needs to be a conversation around legislation of access rules. One of the pervasive issues in this space is bots that pretend to be real people. And so it makes it much harder to control access. We actually think some legislation around that could be even more impactful than legislation around copyright. So we think the legislation piece is critical. However, if you look at it sort of big picture, it's not the only thing that needs to happen, right? We also need to make progress on making authorized compensated access faster and easier. So if you look at it in sort of broad economic terms, what's happening today is the transaction costs, all in transaction costs, so the actual cost, the energy, the time, et cetera, associated with unauthorized access to content are relatively low. You just go out and scrape the web. In the meantime, the transaction costs associated with authorized access to content are very high. You have to go do a direct partnership and hire BD people and lawyers and send an MG and all of this stuff, right? And so what needs to happen in the ecosystem is we need to see the transaction costs associated with unauthorized access rise. Legislation can help with that. More aggressive measures on blocking can help with that. Legal risk can help with that, right? So all of these things can help raise that effective transaction cost for unauthorized access. But we also need to lower the transaction costs associated with authorized access. And that's what TollBit's really focused on, is how do we make it faster, better, easier to just pay for the content than to try and steal it in another way. And I'm glad Elsa mentioned, the Spotify solution in the music industry earlier. That's something we think about a lot. And in the Napster days, the dynamic was very similar, right? It was download music for free or drive to the record store. And what actually solved the problem was eventually Spotify made it faster, better, easier to just pay a subscription for all of your music. Not saying subscriptions is the solution, but the point is we need a product that makes the access faster, better, and easier. So that's what we want to see happen over the coming years.
Good stuff. And anything else, or Alex, that you would add on that question before we come to this final one?
Well, we were discussing about this today, and we think that we must start. How can I say? We cannot put all the eggs in the same. How do you say it in English? Sorry,
basket.
help me. Yeah, thank you. We cannot put all the eggs in the same basket, And until now, our main business was digital in paper. Now we are doing events. But we more than ever must protect our subscribers, our readers, and do many different things, to avoid all this, all the control that Google and the rest of the players are do half, no? That's not good for all of us. Wait and see what happens with the legislation. You know that especially in Europe, we are very concerned about the protection of the individuals, no, and our data as well. And also, in the meantime, no, until all the rules are clear, we must start organizing our archives very well. And especially in these companies like us, no, 30 years old, as you can imagine, we have a lot of content to scan, a lot of content to organize pretty well, because I think that as soon as the rules are pretty clear for all of us, then we must run. And I think that the ones who have done the homework, we will be probably the first, no, and in closing good deals, but we must now do our homework.
Could not agree more. I'm going to just come on to this next question from Tim, and I'm going to just cover that initially. Tim's asking, shouldn't denying access to our content until such a time as an equitable model is presented to us by the LLMs or forced on them by legislation? And as the person leading the trade association at FIPP, I think I'd want to just kind of put an answer across initially on that, which is that I think in hypothetically, yes, I definitely do think that would be the best or a really valid approach. I think the reality, as we sit here today, however, is that we've already seen, to some extent, the cat is already out of the bag, and there's already been deals done and content that is being accessed both with and without permission. And I think, Josh and Cody, tell me if you think otherwise, but I think in some ways, sadly, what your tools show us is that we could all stand firm and deny access to our content as best we could using deny robots.txt files, etc. But the reality is that we're seeing quite clearly that bots and other players are getting around and getting over those denials of access already anyway. And so certainly from my position in terms of the trade association, our recommendation is absolutely that you should be, as Elsa has been talking about, you should be really accounting for every single piece of content, every single asset that you have in that archive, and really understanding and monitoring the value of that, and then using tools and platforms like TollBit and others to monitor and understand where people are coming in. And I'm pretty sure Josh and Cody would say that actually with TollBit, there is an equitable model on offer and a way of addressing that question. So over to you guys to answer that as well.
Yeah, I maybe I think for us be a little more blunt, which is, I think for us, the answer to that question would be an unresounding yes. I think that the fragmentation of this industry only plays to the benefit of the AI companies. And the more that the industry can stand together, act together, and lock down access to the greatest extent possible, I think that will only help push this forward. So yeah, my answer is a sort of short 3-letter answer, which is yes. I think we should all be publishers should all be standing together to block access.
Yep, 100%.
But to clarify, sorry, the last thing on, I think we need to stand together to block access, but also not just block and be defensive, but be productive and work towards a solution that can monetize and can be faster, better, easier. Obviously, we think that should be through TollBit, but any solution, we think would be productive.
Elsa.
Yes, I was thinking that maybe you can also remind us what One Infra was presenting in Krakow, no? Because I remember that they were presenting a statement about their position, no, facing all this. I think it's also a good example.
Absolutely. And FIPP, I should add, thank you for reminding me that as FIPP, we have joined and are joined forces with WAN-IFRA, our counterparts in the news industry, and also with the European Broadcasting Union. We have published, and I can share this with anybody who wants to see it, a very clear 5 key points around integrity of AI. And we've got a very clear manifesto for how we wish to achieve that. And our members and everybody involved with FIPP and WAN-IFRA and EBU are absolutely standing firm behind those key principles, which we believe will drive, and if we can achieve those, will drive the solutions that we're looking for, and essentially will be standing firm in the face of those that are nefariously using that, whilst we wait for legislation and other elements to take part. I'm conscious we're over time, but for those that, but also conscious that we are recording this, and so yes, to Tim's question, this video, to those that have registered, will be available to be shared with colleagues. We know that many people can't make the live broadcast of it, but that's why we record it, and we then actively encourage you to share this with as many colleagues as you can. Marcia Miranda from Brazil. Marcia, hello, hola, very good to hear from you, is asking whether TollBit has a service plan for Brazilian publishers and a way of addressing the Latin American market.
Yeah, another short answer, yes, we're global, and we would love to speak and be helpful.
Fantastic. So Marcia can recommend to your readers and your members there. Marcia represents one of the big media publishers in Brazil, and has access to a broad range of publishers there. So please do recommend that they get in touch with TollBit, and we can make those contacts and introductions through myself. I think all that remains for me on that is 2 things. First and foremost, to thank Josh and Cody from TollBit, and also Elsa and Alex from RBA for joining us and for sharing so much really crucial and critical insight, both from the TollBit's software, but also hearing straight directly from those that have experienced using the platform and what you are now doing. I think that is really, really important for other people to learn from that. Thank you all for attending and for your great questions that have led to that conversation. This recording will be available to download either through the link, or we can email it to you directly. Final thing for me is to say, if you have found this webinar interesting and enjoyed the conversation, then please do think about coming to join us in Madrid, October the 21st to the 23rd, for the FIPP World Media Congress. This has been just a taster for the kinds of conversations and presentations that we will be having. We will be updating on those key principles in AI and what we as a body are doing with that. And there will be plenty of opportunities to network and to discuss with colleagues from all over the world on what we're all learning in this journey. And it is a journey, as we referenced. Elsa, did you have one more?
I also wanted to add that this what's happening was thanks to FIPP, to you, because thanks to not your help to the members, you told me about TollBit. So I encourage the rest of the members of FIPP to ask you, to tell you, because you most of the times can connect people and can help all of us, to try to find a good solution. So thank you also to you, Al, for your help.
Thank you. That's our job. We like to connect. Absolutely. So thank you to TollBit. I think that's a great webinar, and watch this space as things develop.
Thank you for setting this up. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.